Good evening, America, and welcome back to No Kings on the Hill with Dr. Hill Law. And with me, as always, is Joe St. Clair, JD, veteran military intelligence expert and professional BS detector. Tonight, we are going to expose and discuss one of the largest public corruption scandals in modern American history. Roughly, some people are trying to say it was more than $1 billion, but right now, $1 billion is about all you can confirm and that you can actually verify on the DOJ and the FBI networks. There's a total of $1 billion between the multiple different welfare programs there in Minnesota. Fraud ring connected to nonprofit networks, political operatives, and Somali community organizations with direct ties to Democratic leadership in the state. For years, Walz, Ilhan Omar, and their network of politically connected nonprofits and groups waved red flags in law enforcement faces, and for half a decade, the FBI sat on its evidence before finally moving. It's just not just a scandal, it's a breakdown of oversight, federalism, and trust in government. So if you are new here, please check out our website, No Kings on the Hill with drhilllaw.com. See it going across on the banner there at the bottom of the screen, and follow us on our social media accounts, which the links are there on the website for daily videos, weekly lives, and access to all of our previous episodes. Also, please click the follow, subscribe, like, and share buttons to help us grow. Your engagement makes this show better. We are live every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. We also want to thank the Patriots Prayer Channel for having us. Now for a word from our sponsor from Q Broadcasting.
Heard of Q Broadcast? It's taking the world by storm. People are cutting the cord to their high cable bills and moving away from streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and others for something better. Q Broadcast. For just $60 a month, you'll get access to every channel you could ever want, including HBO, Cinemax, and Starz. And the best part? There are no contracts, no hidden fees, and you're free to cancel anytime. With Q Broadcast, you can enjoy streaming live TV, movies, and top series on up to 5 devices at once. Whether you're at home or on the go, Q Broadcast makes sure your entertainment is always at your fingertips. Imagine being able to watch all your favorite channels from anywhere, anytime, without any restrictions. We're talking about thousands of movies, hundreds of TV series, and a huge library of live channels, all in one place. And don't forget video on demand and pay-per-view events. Those are included at no extra cost, so you'll never miss a big event again. Now, take a second and think about your current cable bill. You're probably paying anywhere between $100 and $300 every month, locked into long-term contracts and hit with surprise rate increases. With Q Broadcast, that's a thing of the past. It's just $60 a month. No contracts, no extra fees, no hidden costs, and no price hikes. Why juggle multiple subscriptions like Netflix, Hulu, and cable when Q Broadcast gives you everything you need in one convenient package? People everywhere are switching to Q Broadcast, saving money and getting more content than ever before. So, what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description and sign up for Q Broadcast today. Just $60 a month, no contracts, no hidden fees. It's time to take control of your entertainment and start streaming smarter.
All right. Well, welcome back. In tonight's episode, like I said, we will look at how $1 billion in taxpayer money meant for kids, food stamps, and social services was instead funneled in one of the largest, most complex fraud schemes ever perpetrated against American welfare programs. This case is really emblematic of all that's wrong with government today. Bureaucratic obesity, ideological myopia, a complete lack of oversight, and a state government more concerned with spinning its story than its record, which for those of you who don't know is Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Democratic Congressional Representative Ilhan Omar. So, like I said, we're going to get onto the policy, the administrative failure, and federalism breakdown on this subject. So let's go ahead and get into that for tonight. Now, underlying this story is a hard truth. Minnesota's welfare fraud prevention system failed utterly and just it was ridiculous. Whistleblowers, internal audits, and federal partners all flagged problems within the program for years. Yet under Walz, the administration continued to fund the nonprofits later found to be fraudulent. They weren't even true nonprofits. These companies didn't really exist. I mean, make no mistake, this wasn't a single rogue actor. This was a failure, an institutional failure built on a governor unwilling to push back against politically favored interests, state agencies that were implicitly discouraged from scrutinizing groups associated with the Somali political machine. It all about race, of course, a bureaucracy inoculated to prioritize optics around equity over enforcement, and federal law enforcement that for 5 years inexplicably sat on the state on key evidence. This is not a story of missing funds. This is a story of a state government that abdicated its responsibilities, and this is why federalism matters. We've got to stop worrying about the color of people's skin. If they break the law, they break the law. I mean, states are supposed to administer the very programs that the federal government funds. By when a state fails to meet even basic enforcement standards, billions of federal dollars flow through state-run slushies that protect political cronies. The founders understood this. Unchecked administrative agencies, the so-called fourth branch of government, which is unconstitutional, is a petri dish for corruption. The Walz administration failed to detect the fraud in Minnesota. Their policies enabled it. Their ideology insulated it. Their political allies profited from it. Now, for my co-host Joe's take for his section, and let him take the reins now.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely emblematic of definitely in way far and away abused by the federal system. Essentially what you have is you have a group within the federal government who is working in conjunction with the state government and then recruiting third-party nationals from overseas to bring those people in order to essentially getting them vote blue, vote Democrat, turning Minnesota blue. I don't know. When I was growing up, Minnesota was not known for being extremely liberal or blue. But it seems in the last 10 years, this has been kind of, like he said, a petri dish, an experiment, right? And it's definitely defrauding the American people because what it's showing is that if you've grown up in this country and you've done everything that they've told you to do, you've gone to school, you've worked your job, and, you know, unfortunately, most people are living paycheck to paycheck and on credit. If you lose your job for whatever reason, there's no social net for American citizens, and yet people who grew up in Somalia somehow have access to benefits because they're serving a political machine. So we're rewarding the wrong behaviors. This is completely highlighting the fact that we don't operate in meritocracy, because you look at a person like Ilhan Omar, and what has she done to deserve to be a representative of this country? She's a senator, right? That's almost the peak and zenith of where you can get in terms of power and influence. And what she did to get there is she grew up in a third world country, you know, in a privileged family in a third world country, committed fraud to get here, and then continued to commit fraud in order to get into her position. So,
and her dad committed genocide. I mean,
right. So when you have a system that's rewarding that behavior, it doesn't function. And I think it's a wake-up call for a lot of Americans.
Well,
I'd say, go ahead.
Like I was going to say is that goes to the question, was this incompetence or political cowardice? And I would say it was political cowardice, not incompetence, because like I was talking about in the TikTok live I was in just a minute ago before we jumped on here, was we were talking about how people are afraid to attack anybody that's not white because you can't dislike, for some reason these days politically, you can't dislike somebody because of their policies, because of their personality, because of who they are on the inside. If they're not white and you're white, you dislike them because of their color and because of where they're from. It's not because of their policies and who they are and what they are as a person. And that's even though that's all it is, it has not, majority of the time, it has nothing to do with where they're from or their color. It has to do with their personality. It has to do with their policies and their positions, like the fact that she keeps on saying that, oh, my number one loyalty is to the people of Somalia. I represent the people of Somalia. No, you don't. You represent the people of America. Now, if I'm not saying that you can't want to benefit or to talk to support Somalia or to advocate for them, but you only do that when, and first and foremost, that advocation aligns with your American, your loyalty to America and the American people and the American government and the citizens you serve, not the people of Somalia. If you want to serve Somalia, then go back to Somalia.
Right. So I don't think that there is any loyalty there, and we could attribute it to incompetence, but it raises the question of, if this is occurring in Minnesota, where else is this occurring? What other programs is this occurring with? Because it's the same in any kind of fraud scheme. Once you have the set of tactics in place, it's easy to replicate anywhere across the board. So it's hard not to imagine that. And having been in the military myself, I've always suspected this, that, the federal government is working in conjunction with state governments and committing acts of fraud, funneling money from the American taxpayer back into, essentially political affiliates and programs that provide jobs and create this, I guess, welfare class that depend and must continue to vote blue in order to, survive in this country. And the larger that class gets, the bigger of a parasite is on the system, because unless you have actual people working actual jobs, and again, most people are not self-actualized enough to say, when they're looking and they're seeing that they're going to work 9 to 5 every single day and they're not being rewarded for it, or they're working 2-3 jobs, or they did what they were told and they went to college for 4 years or to graduate school for 7 or 8 years, and they're now indebted. When the system is regularly punishing the people who are doing what they were told to do and then rewarding people who have zero allegiance to this country, then the system is already broken down. And it's a question of what steps need to be taken in order to bring it back into balance. And I think that's kind of the overarching question that comes into play, is what steps are going to be taken to amend this right now. And if those steps are taken, and let's say that Republicans do lose power, what then will the Democrats do as retribution, right? Because clearly they're willing to use the system in that manner.
So let's get into Elmar segment 2. Ilhan Omar's proximity to the fraud. Now, members of her inner circle personally profited from the $1 billion welfare fraud scandal in her district. She held events at one of the restaurants named in the fraud. She knew the owner, and one of her staff members was also convicted. Omar also introduced the legislation that led to the $250 million of the billion being defrauded from federal child nutrition programs during COVID-19 aid. That money was pocketed by Salim Ahmed Saeed, the co-owner of Safari Restaurant, where Omar held her 2018 congressional victory party. That money was traced to the owner's $2 million Minneapolis mansion and a $9,000 per month shopping habit at Nordstrom's. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, this person didn't just get enough money to live day to day. They became a millionaire off of it. Why is somebody who came here as a immigrant become millionaires off the federal government when they haven't paid any taxes? And I've been paying taxes all my freaking life. I mean, the funds were intended for the 2020 Mills Act, but were never spent. I mean, thanks to Biden's administration, the fact that this was a Somali community culture and a fear of being called racist stopped the investigation from moving forward until President Trump took office. I know some estimates have shown that it's up to over 8 billion or whatever, but as of right now, $1 billion is about all you can find any credible sources citing such amounts. Even the DOJ and the FBI show the original $250 million plus other programs, including some for autism and other welfare programs, totaled the $1 billion. So I hear people saying it could be 8 billion, or I'm not saying it's not, but not over, maybe over the whole country, but not within Minneapolis itself. Like you were just saying, I was watching some on the news earlier today about there's a whistleblower coming out in Boston that was talking about all this corruption and welfare and stuff and everything. And then they were talking today about how the people with the Affordable Obamacare Act are not verifying all the stuff on the applications like they're supposed to, like social security numbers, IDs, jobs, stuff like that, or income verification. And you got the millions and millions of fraud there too.
Yeah, I mean, it's quid pro quo with more steps, because they're buying votes, but they're also buying senators in a way, because there's zero chance that this Ilhan Omar is ever going to vote against the system that has gotten her into the position that she's in the first place. So if you don't turn those pipelines off, then inevitably they're going to choke the system.
Yeah,
and I think, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, and that's the other thing we're getting back to earlier is, I know that, okay, if anybody who tries Democrat, if there's a Democrat listening in here that supports Tim Walz, I got a question. If Tim Walz was the CEO of Walgreens or Walmart or whatever, Target, wherever, if he had management under him commit over a couple $1 million in fraud or couple $100 million in fraud, would he have a job? Would he not be charged by that company? Would he at least not be fired and then be blackballed from the whole industry of ever being a CEO again? There's got to be some type, even if Tim Walz did not knowingly commit the fraud, he turned a blind eye. He did not do his job. There's got to be some type of punishment. And I'll get into the reason why I'll get into here in a little bit, and honestly, why I think this fraud was purposeful, because of the fact that people in Congress and especially Democratic Party, once this fraud's proven, could use the argument to take away rights from states.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting because the people who are making these decisions beforehand, obviously you have Congress and the legislature that write laws, but it's the administrative state, people working in the State Department, who are largely making these immigration decisions up front. So when you're kind of analyzing the systems that exist, you have to understand that as far as foreign policy and the American doctrine, where that originates from is there's two groups of thought. You have those who are coming up in the military and intelligence, and they kind of look at the world through what we call like realism, where everything is a battle of power and everyone is a rational actor acting in their own best interest. Everything is gamified.
Yep.
And then you have the liberal interpretation of the world. And that's taught in, universities, and people flowing in the State Department have that kind of view where they kind of view everything as everyone can cooperate and universal utopia and peace can be achieved. So you have those two kind of conflicting worldviews converging, but the fact that they are actively bringing in what you consider kind of an outside node of power, taking that from a country like Somalia and then transmuting it into our system in order to give themselves power, that should be very alarming to every single American, because it's unconstitutional, it's sociopathic, it is power hungry, and it's un-American. And I think it kind of also makes us need to reflect on the fact that even when this country was founded during the Revolutionary War, it was only 33% of the colonial population that supported the American Revolution. It's always been a civil war. So there's always been these internal forces that they would rather enrich and profit and glorify themselves than, kind of fight these systems of slavery that keep getting set up over and over and over, that our entire Constitution is designed to prevent.
Oh, yeah. And now kind of going to what you were just talking about, the current form of federalism which operates like a 3-layer cake. And because it kind of all ties in together, it's state and federal and local and all that working together. And it's why we're seeing such corruption in a way. Now, while I would never advocate for bigger government, this is what I was talking about earlier, the states must be held more accountable for failing to properly monitor the nonprofits and for-profit companies that are awarded funds through the programs that they're supposed to monitor. While the states should always be the ones in control due to states' rights and the separation of powers in the Constitution, since the late 1980s, Fifth Amendment jurisprudence has been another significant influence in shaping federalism, and is a perfect example of the waxing and waning of federalism in a particular policy area. This statement refers to private property in the takings clause, but it kind of ties into what we're talking about today and about what I'm going to kind of go into, which is following widespread corruption. It wouldn't be a surprise if Congress sought authority to monitor federal tax dollars for local programs through HUD or other federal agencies. Once again, seeing the federal government gain more power leaves the possibility of losing our constitutional republic to a new one world order. And that's what I was kind of getting to a minute ago, is that's the problem with this. Is I think almost kind of why it's planned is because Americans, do they like to take the hard way or the easy way and the safe way? And if the federal government goes, well, if the Democrats or whoever wants to be in power goes, oh, well, hey, if you want it to be, you want the easy way and make sure that your states aren't having to spend a bunch more money or tax or whatever, then we're going to take over the monitoring of these programs. And now that power is taken from the states. which it's not. Now we're going from a cake layered one to more of the unitary one party control the federal government. And then what's next? They take everything.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Do Americans prefer the easy way or the hard way? And I would say traditionally, the waves of immigrants and the people who populated America, they preferred the hard way, right? We had the Pilgrims who risked their lives just to have religious freedom. Following the Pilgrims, then you had waves of, Irish who were essentially avoiding famine. You had people who were capitalists who wanted to make money and saw an opportunity. Then you had farmers from across Europe who saw the opportunity to, exit serfdom and actually own property and have a homestead of their own. So traditionally, America has been filled and populated with people with almost a certain hypomanic, right, energetic, excited, let's go conquer the world attitude. And I think that's kind of the divide we're seeing today, is that maybe I was born in 1992, maybe my generation is the last, and I don't even think many people in my generation have that.
I was asking that question more since like September 11th, since then, because if you looked, look at the how people gave in so easy to the Patriot Act, and stuff like that. They took the secure and the safe way over the harder way,
right?
And that's what I was getting to. Is like, it wouldn't be that hard for them to claim, hey, states lack the resources or funds to monitor such programs for fraud. And so while obviously I don't support this, it's why we must ensure that Walz pays a price so that no other governor allows such a scandal to happen under their leadership, so no one even thinks about it. I mean, it should have political ramifications. It could end up having, it's going to have major political ramifications for 2026 midterm, and it should. But I mean, unfortunately, we hardly ever see governors punished, and we hardly ever see people get unelected out of office. And that's kind of where we're at now. Is it's the fact that if he's allowed to get away with this, then other states are going to save money and use money to put other places or wherever they felt like their friends and their family or the lobbyists want them to spend it, because they'll just be like, oh, the federal government will just take care of it. It'll cost Americans some more taxpayer dollars, and I don't get punished. I don't face any charges, and I get to keep being a governor and reelected. I mean,
do you think he'll survive it? I think, unfortunately, I don't think anybody voting blue, I don't think they're aware of any of this. I think they're plugged into their own media circles.
They're aware of it. They just don't want to believe it.
Maybe.
Most of them have seen this. It's been talked about everywhere. It's just they want to ignore it and say, oh, this is just a Trump attack. This is just the Republicans going after him. He's innocent. And it's just like, I'm sorry, the corruption's there. It doesn't matter whether he said, hey, go ahead and do this, or it happened under his leadership. Either way, the buck stops with him.
He's got some questionable ties to the CCP as well. I know he's been traveling in and out of China for the last 30 years as well. I don't know if you know about that. He's a high school teacher, and he would take his kids on field trips there, and the CCP was partially funding it.
Yeah, that came up during his when he was picked as a vice president and stuff candidate. Came up during the presidential campaign. But I hope he doesn't survive this. I hope for the betterment of our country and the betterment of our republic, he does get punished for this. Whether that means he's impeached and removed from office, or he actually serves jail time, or he just doesn't serve it, or he's fine, he suffers fines or something. But he's got to suffer some type of punishment that is career ending, or depending on how tied into this he is. If it was just straight negligence, then even in the military, if you were a military officer and you had that much of a negligent under your command, you would be going to Leavenworth.
Is he retired as well?
Yeah, but that won't fall into this. But I mean, still, it's like that you would go to Leavenworth for dereliction of duty in the military. So right. I'm not saying that necessarily he needs to go to prison. Obviously, if he actually conducted or benefited, or people that were directly connected to him benefited from the money, then like with Ilhan Omar, then he deserves to go to prison for it. But at the least, he deserves to be impeached and removed from office, period. for even letting this happen under him, because he should have been paying attention. He should have been listening to the whistleblowers, not ignoring them. He shouldn't have been worried about the optics or that it was the Somali community. Who cares? You're not going after them because they're from Somalia. You're not going after them because they're immigrants. You're going after them because they're defrauding the American taxpayer.
I'm a little bit worried because I've been waiting for the Comey indictment to be put back forward, and obviously Brennan, and the lack of movement on those indictments and the lack of movement of any accountability of anybody within the government for anything has me a little worried. And I wonder if they are not able to convict anyone while in power. I wonder if the rhetoric is going to come back and bite them when the Democrats get back into power.
Yeah, I think the Comey, he was thrown out there as a sacrificial lamb so it would make the MAGA base and the America First base happy, just so they would see something happen and they could see what happens when you rush something too fast. I am still at the argument in the site that they are trying to make sure that they have everything down, tightened up, all the evidence that they need, that there's no way that some leftist judge can push it out, push it away, get rid of them, throw the case out. And I still think we're going to be looking towards the midterms, towards the end of the midterms. So this also can't be used. So the Democrats can't be running on, hey, look, he's going after his political opponents. He's going after his political, he's using lawfare for political gain or political reasons. He's not doing it because they broke the law. And I think that some of it has to do with that fact too. And because he doesn't want to just give them that much ammunition with midterms coming up. But I think some of it's also because when it comes to in our legal system, it's not about whether you're guilty or not. It's what how good of a story your attorney can tell, and how good at researching previous cases they are, that they can say, oh, this case has to do with this, and this is why you should not. This is why this evidence should be thrown out, or this is why this prosecutor should be thrown off, or this is why this grand jury testimony should be stricken from record. And it's not about whether you're guilty or innocent. It's about how good of a attorney team you have behind you. And when you're that powerful, that rich, you're going to have the top attorneys in the world, not just the United States, but the world. So.
Well,
yeah.
I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know.
I think that's where that comes into, is that a lot of it has to do with that fact, is it has to do with the fact that it's not easy to take somebody down that big. I mean, obviously it was easy for them to make up stuff and go after President Trump, because Democrats, they all stick together when it comes to the party. Even if they don't agree with each other, they still stick together. They rise or fall with the ship, but they also control the majority of the mainstream media. So it's a whole lot easier, and they have a good amount of judges that they can pick too. So especially in the DC area. So it has a lot to do with that too.
Yeah. It makes you wonder what the trajectory overall is going to be. I'm optimistic. I think that, it's hard to think that everything's going to fall apart very quickly, but it is hard to see. We have basically two different forces, like poles, just pulling apart at the seams, and it's hard to imagine those two groups coming back together. I don't really understand how the liberal movement can continue on, because they're not having kids, and if the immigration pipeline's turned off, then that's going to take down their source of incoming voters. So on one hand, I could see that dying out on its own, but on the right, I'm also seeing the emergence of, it's almost like there's certain people on the right who claim to be that they're on the right, but they're not actually on the right. But what they are is they're on the side of centralization of power and authoritarianism too. And they're just as likely to hijack the America First MAGA Republican movement as the power hungry on the left. Yeah. So I just wonder if mass amnesty would be better. If mass amnesty would be better, just like they did after the Civil War, and kind of say, hey, if you took part in this tell us what happened. We hold the top people responsible, and we kind of try to heal the wounds a little bit. I don't know if that makes sense.
Does my camera still look good?
Yeah.
Okay, because I pulled and so I could actually look at the camera when I was reading this instead of looking off to the side. I actually tried using the display part of my prompter, so I actually have my teleprompter is now my computer screen. But this is what Benny Johnson put today. He goes to the people out saying that they don't care about the success of the America First movement. Do you understand the alternatives? He goes, when the left regains power, they promise to nuke the filibuster, add 12 new Supreme Court justices or take it to 12 justices, implement unlimited vote by mail and vote by phone, lower the voting age to 16, allow criminal aliens to vote, naturalize over 30 million criminal aliens, add 4 more permanent Democratic Senate seats by making D.C. and Puerto Rico states, ensure Republicans can never win an election again, trans the kids, the sports, and the bathrooms, criminalize homeschool, censor all independent channels, journalists, and thinkers, criminalize free speech, and open borders permanently. Now, I thought President Trump was the Nazi and Mussolini or Stalin or whatever. I'm sorry, but the stuff that we're starting to see that's finally coming out that the EU has been doing that's going on over in Europe is literally what the left wants to do here. And that is a Hitler and a Stalin, not what Trump's trying to do.
I think that's also, have you been watching the news regarding the war in Ukraine and the deadline given? Essentially, the Trump administration gave Zelensky until Christmas in order to reach peace, but Zelensky has already said he's going to completely reject any peace deal, and that's what the Europeans have been pushing forward. But it's very interesting because on one hand, you're seeing the rise of kind of globalism trying to eat and absorb at all systems, every country on earth, and then you have the right in America pushing back against it, and we're told that Russia's the enemy, right? But really, they're also pushing back against it. And now it seems that, I don't know if you've heard this, but Trump has talked about getting out of NATO by 2027.
Well, so, I say if Zelensky doesn't want to take a peace deal that's not giving, and maybe giving a little bit of land back, but it's not giving a whole lot. And when people say, well, would we give any land back? Well, if we got our butts kicked like that, if we wanted to end the war and stop having our people killed, then we would have to give up some land. It's not that it's a good thing or not, but obviously, like we talked a couple episodes ago back, there's no way that Putin can just pull out of Ukraine without getting something. His generals would unalive him and then just nuke Ukraine. I mean, simple as that.
Yeah, he's dragging it out because he knows as soon as the war's over, he's going to be taken out of office. And then he's going to be in the same position Maduro's in Venezuela, where he's not going to have a safe place to go. But I think it's also, I don't know, in my lifetime, I don't know how many Europeans you've met. I've traveled throughout the world in Europe, Middle East, South America, and I've always found Europeans to be very hostile towards Americans and kind of talk down to us. The U.S. as uncultured, arrogant, stupid, loud, and as much as they claim to be our friends, even on an interpersonal level, I've noticed it's the wealthy, affluent, educated Europeans that really do not like us, and I think they've secretly been cheering on us being taken down as a superpower because, there's some resentment, even though we helped them after World War II. They've been kind of subservient to us for the last 80 years. So there's definitely some resentment there. I don't think they are natural allies to us. And
well, I mean, they did create the EU to try to compete with the America. I mean, they created the EU in the almost format that the Articles of Confederation were, just more as a currency, the strength of currency for it. That didn't work. But what I'll say this: if they're telling Zelensky not to give, and then you know what, fine, if they want to try to help Zelensky get Russia out of there and want to start a war with Russia, I say we pull out of NATO before that happens and we just let Europe go to war with Russia, because President Trump negotiated a peace deal, got Putin to agree to it. It maybe wasn't exactly what Zelensky wanted, but it was still a lot less than what Putin wanted. Because if it was up to Putin, he would get the whole country, not actually have to give up some of the gains he's already gotten, and allow America to have American companies, in there, even though we may not have American boots on the ground. But I mean, obviously, if we have American companies and miners in there, then Russia knows that if they were to attack Ukraine and hurt those American people, then that's might as well be attacking American military personnel. So it's still in the same aspect of they can't. It's almost like having military personnel there, but it's not. I mean, obviously they don't have tanks, and they're not going to. But part of the deal was also to give Zelensky F-35s and a bunch of train 600,000 soldiers in Ukraine. I mean, was ridiculous the stuff we were giving them.
Yeah. Well, I think moreover too, it's about resources, right? Ukraine is the biggest breadbasket and natural gas reserve in Europe. And then obviously you have Africa filled with oil and gas, but Europe itself, which is a highly developed area, it's not having enough kids. It also doesn't have any natural resources, and it's having an existential crisis, right? And in their psyche, they're struggling because they're fighting between, do they embrace becoming civilization that survives and dominates again, or do they let themselves essentially just wither and die out because, as quote unquote civilized or developed, they're perfectly fine with their governments going overseas and dominating and taking resources so long as they don't know about it. And that's why the war in Russia is so good for the European elites, because they are able to trick their populace and say, hey, Russia's the bad guy. Russia's the aggressor. Russia's the one invading, neutral countries. But they've completely indoctrinated and stupefied their populations to the fact that they don't realize, okay, why is that Europe's been inching closer and closer to Russia in terms of where the NATO line is for the last 30 years. So, it's the European elites that are really selling out their people in order to enrich themselves and survive. And if you kind of look at history, it seems to be the case. This is what's always happened in empire. We saw the Babylonian elites survived, and you can read about this in the Bible. This is how the Jews went from Israel and Judah to Babylon, to the Hittites, then to Babylon, and then to Persia. So time and time again, the elites survive and they get absorbed into the new system, and they allow, the lower classes to be absorbed. And that seems to be what the European elites are going for as they try to get empire to unify the entire globe. And certainly I don't want that here. I don't think you want that here, but that's what they're trying to do to us as well.
Yeah. Well, let's get on to the lightning rounds or some of the subjects in there. Let's start with the Supreme Court schedule arguments on birthright citizenship. Now, I think it's funny how people keep on arguing that birthright citizenship is constitutional, all this, and when literally no other country has birthright citizenship, really. I mean, we're the only country that gives somebody citizenship just for having a baby here. Not even the freaking foreign dignitaries get that here. They just because they're here as a dignitary doesn't mean their kids are automatically given citizenship. It all depends on agreements and stuff. But still, what a lot of people understand is when the 14th Amendment was written, yes, it was poorly written, but at the time it was written to overturn Dred v. Scott. It was literally written so that children of slaves who were brought here, whose parents were brought here by no fault of their own, that were brought here as slaves, that those children were given citizenship because their parents were not considered U.S. citizens. It was that they were given citizenship. Yeah, it was not written. Our founding fathers and there were people that were around at the time of the 14th Amendment did not write that 14th Amendment thinking that, it was going to mean anybody who ever stepped their feet in American soil was going to be given citizenship. And that we would literally have people come in here pregnant just so their kids, to line about how pregnant they are, come in here to have babies just so their kids can get citizenship. And my question is, where do you think the court's going to lie? I mean, with it being an original Supreme Court, I think it's going to lie on being against birthright citizenship. Now, whether they will strict it 100% or how broad the legal argument will go on it to where it could even strike towards the due process rights of illegal immigrants, or whether it's a very narrow, legally worded argument. It could still be 30 pages long, be a long argument, but it's still narrow legally wise, and it just strictly does birthright citizenship. But obviously, considering the 14th Amendment ties in an extension of due process rights from the Fifth Amendment plus birthright citizenship, it technically could go that far.
I mean, the Supreme Court in the past, even those judges that claim to be originalists, they have been engaged in a certain level of judicial activism based on their interpretation of what originalism is. And I think that enough of the court is, right-leaning conservative, and I think they've shown a willingness to realize that this is kind of many of these cases that are going up to them are existential. So the right of the president to deport non-citizens, obviously birthright citizenship, that's another one, whether or not he can levy the tariffs. And I think also at the end of the day, his ability essentially to curtail the federal agencies in the sense that he's able to unilaterally fire bureaucrats, the fourth estate, right? So this is kind of a battle playing out where it's the executive branch, coming into power and dominating this fourth estate, eliminating it. And I think that's how it's going to play out. Is it's going to either be reined in and brought in underneath the executive branch, but then the question is once that occurs, how do we prevent that power shifting and sitting with the executive branch? Because we don't want power centralized either with the fourth estate or with the first estate. So
yeah, but that was Congress's fault. Congress is the one who literally created the fourth branch of government, and that since 1913, 1917 has slowly given rights away from Congress to the administrative branch, or the deep state, or the administrative state. And the only problem with it, the only thing is Trump's really been the first president that said, fine, you want to give all this power to the administrative state that's under the purview of the executive, then I'm going to start using that power. Because when I was here during my first term, I would sit there and pass executive orders or even policies, but those policies never got implemented because unelected bureaucrats that were appointed by Obama were slow walking everything. And they elected me and my policy, the American people, a majority of them, and because he won the majority of the votes, elected me for the policies I was running on. And if I can't implement those policies, how can I do why should somebody who was elected or appointed under another president be able to affect my policies when I was elected to implement those policies when that person's president was unelected?
Yeah.
I mean, because that's the problem. So this would have to put the onus on Congress taking back their powers to actually start writing true policy instead of broad-ass legislation that allows a unelected bureaucrat then to really draw up the politically I guess you could say politically hot potato part of it up that are separated from them, so they can say, oh, I didn't do that. So they can separate themselves from the really politically damaging parts of that piece of legislation or that policy, because they can blame it on the unelected bureaucrats instead of saying, oh, well, I just wrote a bill that said this. But the problem is that bill doesn't actually give that bill just has a section, maybe a page or two. It's not the actual policy that does it. It just literally words saying here, do studies in this and this study to how to implement this policy. It doesn't actually say what the policy is. It just says, this is what we're trying. This is our ultimate goal. And we want you to do studies, and we want you to write the policy how to meet that goal. And as long as they stick within that broad goal or close to it, then Congress doesn't do anything. And the problem is that was never supposed to be it. It was supposed to be Congress's job that did it. Now, the argument back in the 40s and stuff was that, oh, congressional members aren't specialized enough to understand what's going on with HUD or all the different branches. Well, fine. Then you have a committee of specialists, of policy specialists for each group that you work with. But you are the one who makes the final say so on how that policy is approved, on what they get done. They have to argue with you, and then you still have to pass it. So that way the American people can still hold you to account for it. Because what they've done is they've given away. And so now Trump's the first one that said, well, fine, if you're going to give all this power to the executive, I'm going to start using it. I mean, that's kind of the way it is. It's like, if Congress isn't going to do their job, then I'm going to do it for them because they already gave it to the executive to do anyways. And that's what's happened. Everybody tries to act like Trump's trying to violate the Constitution. No, he's just using the powers that they gave over the last 40, 50 years. So, yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
I also, in terms of thinking about like the different spheres of power, right? We know the reason that the founding fathers had the three branches, right, is because they kind of viewed it as you have one branch that creates the law, one branch that enforces the law, and one branch that interprets the law, right? So it's just the natural different perspectives of the law, the natural different actions the law takes, and the government reflects that. But when you have a part of the government like the legislature, or I would throw in all three branches in terms of them reassigning their powers to the fourth estate, because we've seen it in federal agencies that have existed under the system of executive orders that the president has issued. He set up a lot of federal agencies, as well as the judiciary ruling that agencies both under the legislative branch as well as the executive branch are free to interpret the law in any way they see fit, right? Because they are the policy experts. So the way that these policymakers and the way that intelligence analysts and those who study international relations think about these groups is they think of them almost as organisms or waves of energy, right? So when you have one organism within the system, like the legislative branch, that reassigns power to a group of bureaucrats, then it's almost, the word I keep using is parasite. That being said, Trump is almost a reaction, right? Because Trump represents the America, United States, the nation state, and that entity is fighting for survival right now, and it's fighting against the rise of supranational organizations like the EU, trade organizations like BRICS. Internally, we have the rise of different forms of socialistic thought, like critical race theory. Then you also have the rise of multinational corporations. So when America was founded, you really only had the nation state as the dominant kind of operating unit in the world. But now we have, dozens, if not hundreds of other types. And the United States is just as threatened by Apple as it is by, Russia, as it is by China, as it is by BRICS, as it is by the EU, in the sense that if it doesn't take the decisions it needs to take now, which are some tough decisions, then we're going to fizzle out. So it's the same thing as if you're an addict and you don't take the steps necessary to get off the addiction, it's going to kill you in the long run. And right now we're addicted to infinite money. We're addicted to easy lives, instant gratification, and it's getting worse each and every generation. And it's like, how do we reel this back in?
And I think part of me, Alana, I think, because obviously he doesn't plan, the whole 2028 thing was a joke started by the Sun. I think a lot of President Trump's arguments in here is literally to force Congress to take back their powers, to literally do that, because he doesn't want all those powers in the thing, but that's why he's trying to push them. But unfortunately, it's probably going to backfire, and he's not going to get enough of it pushed to force the Congress to do it during his term. And if the Democrats get elected with all that new power, they're just going to keep on taking. And I mean, we got to look at, you look at, a lot of people don't understand is during World War I and especially World War II, we pretty much were a socialist nation. I mean, the government pretty much took over every industry there is, and then created a lot of the administrative agencies we have got created during the war to support the war. But after the war, they were not dissolved. They changed names, maybe changed a little bit of function, but they stayed going. And then obviously we have the New Deal era with the creation of HUD and the creation of affordable housing after the war, coming back from World War II. Then the highway interstate system and the programs that are created from that, and then Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare and blah, blah, blah. And it just keeps going and going. And a lot of those were created through executive orders, but then they were legalized or codified through legislation going back. And also, and that's again, I think some of the stuff that he's also pushing for to have the court, he's pushing through the court because there's only two ways to really make an executive order stick. The one way is for Congress to codify it. But if the federal, if somebody challenges it to the courts and then the courts rule on it, that also kind of helps codify it in a way. I mean, it was one of the reasons why he had to rename the Gulf of America, because even though the drilling restrictions for the Gulf of Mexico that were created was through an executive order, while there was no legislation that was passed, obviously Republicans did challenge it to the courts. It lost. The Supreme Court ruled in the ability for the president to do the drilling thing, so it kind of stuck that in there, and that's why he had to change the name of the Gulf to Gulf of America so he could bypass that section. I mean, that was literally the whole reason he did that. So
I didn't know
Gulf
that.
America, it sounds really nice, and it should have been Gulf America anyways, because we have more. That Gulf covers more American land than it does Mexico. I mean,
I guess that happened when I was still in Venezuela, because I didn't know about that, and then I heard that, and I thought that
there was an executive order that President Biden had signed, something about it that stopped the drilling of oil from on the wells to environmental things or something, environmental policy that stopped all drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, and because of the case that was charged to oil giants or whatever that challenged that executive order, Supreme Court ruled that the executive order was constitutional, which then in a roundabout way codified that executive order, because obviously the easiest way is to get legislation to codify it, but Supreme Court rules is it a constitutional, then that in a way codifies that executive order depending on what it is. So that's why he didn't rename the Gulf of America just to be boastful or did that. He did that to get around that executive order. And that was the whole reason he did that, was to get around the executive order so we could start drilling in the Gulf of America. I mean, honestly, I don't know why it wasn't the Gulf of America, other than probably Mexico called it the Gulf of Mexico when we arrived in America. And I know this isn't on I don't know why Fox News ever got rid of John Stossel. I don't understand why they got rid of his show. That guy is so good. I was watching this. He was doing a interview with this professor that does like African history and stuff like that. And they were talking about slavery and how all these people try to act like America was just so bad with slavery and all this stuff. And they were talking about how even though Saudi Arabia only made slavery legal like maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago, they still have a good amount of slaves in Saudi Arabia. It's still not highly regulated. And so there's still African slaves in Saudi Arabia and white slaves. And then they were talking about how while the North and South American continent, while the American continents, our areas took over 4 million slaves, America only took 400,000. The reason why we are the ones that are most noticed for it is because actually South America took more slaves than America, but we were the only ones that had the slaves that lived. Because the ones in South America were clearing the Amazon, so their life expectancy was very short.
Yeah.
So you really didn't have a big.
I think 87% of slaves went to South America, and only 13% went to Europe, Canada, even Central America to North America. Yeah, and you're right, the majority of them died, but.
So we get blamed for it like we were worse or something when we weren't. It's just because our slaves were allowed to live. We made it, outlawed it. And so they actually stayed living here and we're here. So that's kind of how it gets. But in reality, slavery, the professor was talking about how you can take every country back then was involved in the slave trade. It wasn't like it was America. And actually most of the slaves did not go from Africa to America. They went from Africa to Europe, then to America. They came from England or France or Italy to America. They did not come from Africa directly to America. Now, sometimes they did, but the majority of them went to Europe, then they came here. Yeah, I know it's off was
true.
kind of off our subject for night, but I was watching this John Stossel clip last night, and
I love John Stossel. John Stossel. There's a guy named Ben. I think it was Ben Walsh. He was another reporter in New Hampshire, but John Stossel, that dude, they were the ones reporting on Ron Paul when I was like 16 years old. So
yeah,
I still love John Stossel because
the shows I messed at the end of the year, he used to do the warning signs. Like, what's the most idiotic warning sign? Because if they put a warning on it, somebody's tried it. And like at the end of the year, he'd read off like the most crazy warning signs of the year.
Yeah, that's there's also who's the dude that does he does the jobs. Dirty Jobs.
Yeah, I know you're talking about.
Yeah. All those guys are pretty woke, or I guess the word would be based, right? Because on the left it's woke, on the right it's based. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah. But, all right. Well, let me do the ending for anybody that's going to be watching on Q, and if we want to go for a little bit longer, we can. So, well, we are running out of time for tonight. Thank you for tuning in tonight to No Kings on the Hill with Dr. Hill Law and Joe St. Clair. Please don't forget to check out our website, as you can see going across the bottom of the screen there. No Kings on the Hill with drhilllaw.com. That's No Kings on the Hill with drhilllaw.com. And follow us on social media pages to get access to daily posts, weekly TikTok lives, and subscriber-only lives on TikTok. And sign up on the website for access to our weekly blog. Also, please don't forget to subscribe or follow, depending on where you're watching us from on our show. And let us know if there are any topics you would like us to cover or changes you'd like, style changes you'd like to see in the show or whatever. Like on that, your input and engagement are what make the show better. And let us know lets us know we were doing a good job. Once again, thank you to the Patriots Prayer Channel. Don't forget to check out all the other conservative podcasts and Christian podcasts on the channel. And have a blessed week. Hope to see y'all next week or tomorrow when I do my TikTok live. All right, man. I got that done a little shorter in an hour, but whatever.
That's all right. My buddy just got home. He's petting the dog right now anyway. So
yeah,
I probably should get going.
Yeah, I was trying to get done because like last time, it's just so I don't want to be a pain in the butt to the
cutters,
to the person that puts us on Q, because I mean that's where majority of the views come from is Q Broadcasting, and that's when they put us on there. But that's the one that it's like limited to exactly an hour. So
all right, yeah. Well, I'm gonna get chatting. I'll keep an eye out for your TikTok lives. I think I need to either make a new TikTok. Or...
Yeah, get your TikTok on, because I think the best way we should do the lives is co-hosting. So that way you've got your live going out on the FYP and bringing people in. Yeah. That way hopefully we can get more, because it's both of us bringing lives versus just one of us.
Okay. All right. I got to get going. All right.
All righty, man.
All right.
See you later.
Ciao.